it's an honor to be here speaking on the occasion of Shri JaipalReddy Garu Memorial Foundation event. Today I would like to begin with a few comments about, I don't want to even look at the title, whether media is subverting democracy, but I would like to sort of begin with a philosophical question that Professor Pavan raised, the dialectic of free speech and press freedom. To that end, I will connect with some of the work, the 1970s UNESCO debates that happened in tricontinental debates. Well, Shri JaipalReddy sir was, I think, a key player in the Prasar Bharati bill that subsequently, beginning with the 70s, he was sort of instrumental in providing the debates, media autonomy, and other important things that, for instance, with so many committees, whether, committees like Chanda Committee in 1960s, Varghese Committee in 1970s, Joshi Committee in 1984, and we all remember in 1982, television broadcast media was, inaugurated with the Asian Games. So the debates about media autonomy actually, Shri JaipalReddy is a key player there. First as an INB minister, and then later also in I.K. Gujral's government. He was the key player. If you guys would like to, I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but if you would like to look at that, I have a book that was published by the Cambridge University Press on media in India, Doordarshan and All India Radio, looking at that broadly philosophical look at the evolution of media. There I have a chapter on media policies and debates, beginning with JaipalReddy's work and the political discourse, and then looking at the legislative agendas and all of that, Sen Gupta and others, Supreme Court 1996 decision on public. Now, in my presentation today, I would like to focus on two things here. If we all remember, we all know that the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021, two journalists, right? Maria Ressa, I'm just reading here, uses freedom of expression to expose abuse of power, use of violence, and growing authoritarianism in her native country, the Philippines. Today we have the Junior Marcos in Philippines. Duterte is gone, but you have equally dangerous individual. So she was key in sort of developing that investigative journalism. She was the CEO of Rappler digital network, and free expression was critical for her, looking at Duterte's regime of controversial, murderous anti-drug campaigns and all that. And then you have Dmitry Andreevich Muratov. Two people shared the Nobel Peace Prize 2021. He was a journalist who defended the, again, free speech, freedom of expression in Russia under increasingly challenging conditions. So these are, I think, exemplary examples of high quality journalism, investigative journalism. I would like to sort of give a sense in which even Mahatma Gandhi, there's a fascinating book by Isabel Hofmeyr called Gandhi's Printing Press, Experiments in Slow Reading. Just read that little blurb here, you begin to see how Gandhi is a young mind, and as Pavan was talking about, his ability to sort of use the printing press to great effect, apart from traveling in railways, At the same time, Gandhi, as a young lawyer in South Africa, began fashioning his political philosophy. He was absorbed by a seemingly unrelated enterprise, creating a newspaper. He was a sometime proprietor of a printing press and launched the periodical Indian Opinion. The skills Gandhi honed as a newspaperman, distilling stories from numerous sources, circumventing shortages of style, influenced his sparse prose style. Operating out of the colonial Indian Ocean press, Gandhi saw firsthand how a global empire, the British Empire, depended on the rapid transmission of information over vast distances. Gandhi sensed that communication in the industrial age was becoming calibrated to technological tempos. But he responded by slowing the pace, experimenting with modes of reading and writing focused on bodily, not mechanical rhythms. Favoring the use of hand-operated presses, he produced a newspaper to contemplate rather than scan, one more likely to excerpt thorough than feature easily glossed headlines. So that was Gandhi's work. Just a few words about, since it's Jaipal Reddy's Memorial Foundation, I wanted to say that, they don't make MPs like that anymore. Very reflective, philosophical oriented MP like Jaipal Reddy. I can remember in the United States, despite the differing opinions we have, John McCain, or we have Dick Lugar, who was, Republican senators who would debate and discuss policies with a certain basic minimum understanding of reasoning. And that was, I think, very crucial. And Jaipal Reddy's work is emblematic of that. He was connecting with ideas of democracy, and I would refer to his book 10 Ideologies. The chapter on democracy is fascinating. If you were to look at very condensed, neat, elaboration of how democracy, not just in Greece but also in Vaishali and other places around the world. Now, let me get to the debates of 1960s and 70s. We all know that 1919 Woodrow Wilson, that the first, the mandate system, the Wilsonian moment. There is a book by Erez Manila which talks about Woodrow Wilson's 14 points in the League of Nations that he developed with Jan Smuts. Now, Jan Smuts was a guy who was in South Africa where Gandhi has to deal with him, right? So he, they don't invite Gandhi to the Paris 1919 convention because they knew that this Gandhi would create problems for them, trouble for them. And as they were developing the League of Nations or the liberal internationalism, which is again a problematic idea of liberal internationalism, we'll get to that in a little bit. And the most important thing is about decolonization, self-determination to be precise, that Woodrow Wilson invoked in that 1919. And many of those countries, India, including India, Egypt, China, Japan, quickly grabbed Ho Chi Minh and others, from Cambodia and Vietnam. They were sort of understanding that this first time that we will have the home rule and all of that. So it was a global ethos within which people were talking about it. 1947, Harry Truman and decolonization decades, then the Cold War geopolitics, all of that have shaped the rise of the whole idea of the free speech and press freedom. Now, press freedom is very crucial for many of those non-Western societies, particularly Global South, as you will remember, Africa, Latin America, South America, and also India. Within that, UNESCO was at the forefront in the debates about free speech and press freedom. Now, free speech, as we all know, it has a very peculiar beginnings. I'm writing a book presently on the global intellectual history of free speech. I'm looking at freedom and liberty from non-Western perspectives, looking at India in the Sanskritic traditions and looking at Persian usage of the word, and even in other languages. Quite a broad set of ideas about what constitutes freedom and how free speech developed in the context of England, where the bunch of parliamentarians, they didn't have access to free speech, and of course drawing from John Milton's Areopagitica, where free speech itself, as adumbrated by John Milton, was in a way exclusionary. It would not include Catholics, it would not include Turks, it would only include certain groups of people. So John Milton's idea of free speech was problematic from the start. And when John Adams and Tom Jefferson in the United States borrowed those ideas, and from even John Locke's private property and all that, they developed the whole idea of free speech. It was already in itself deeply troublesome. Of course, Bruno and others would use it to great effect, but there is always a political problem with free speech. There is a great debate in terms of the jurisprudence in the United States. Great lawyers and great judges have sort of elaborated some marketplace of ideas and other kinds of things, which is again very powerful. We lack that in India, the jurisprudence of free speech and press freedom. You will see that a whole history in the United States. Now quickly to the debates. Bandung 1955, G77, the free flow of information. Press and radio were at the forefront. Press is in a way the press of writing, right? Meaning it's not about digital media, which comes much later, broadcasting and all of that. So press became a crucial thing. Community media was big in third world countries, and there were again debates, political debates within Bandung, Nehru, Tito, and others, Egypt, Nasser, who were doing, the meetings in Indonesia, Jakarta. That was a famous debate there. So the whole idea of the third world, in the 1970s, the New Information Economic Order, NIEO, which was substituted by New Information International economic order. Information becomes an important thing here. And then we had the rise of the ICTs, information communication technologies, in France and in the United States. The whole discourse of telematics, microelectronics, private corporations became big there. And then the crucial debate between Friedrich Hayek and Keynes, welfare capitalism on the one hand and libertarian corporate libertarianism, that seemed to be at play in the 1930s and 40s, that defined what freedom of the press meant. Freedom of the press from the state, because if you look at again the definition of two concepts of freedom by Isaiah Berlin, negative and the positive concept of freedom that he has articulated, the liberal philosopher, that you will see that it is problematic because it is lurching towards the market forces, the privatized corporate, the world, the capitalism, for instance, which Hayek and others have elaborated. So the new World Information Communication Order that was in 1984 under the auspices of UNESCO, they took up a whole range of issues with the free flow of information and right to communicate as something that was crucial, not just free speech. Free speech would be already tethered to a certain liberal understanding of freedom of expression that is more capitalist. And there was a theologian in the United States called Reinhold Niebuhr. Niebuhr wrote about some of the dangers of libertarianism, and the debate actually in 1947 there was a committee report called the Hutchins Committee Report in the United States, where they had on the one hand William Hawking, who was advocating for a social responsibility of the press, but there were others like Shafi and others, Zachary Shafi and others who were talking about corporate libertarianism, which you find increasingly the privatized. So the media, role of media, market, and the state, the relationship, the three sort of crucial forces here. So the privatization of media began much earlier, and that is what you see today in India with the rise of neoliberalism in 1970s and 80s, economic globalization, and the Murdochization of Rupert Murdoch, Murdochization of news, infotainment becomes something much more crucial here. So these are the things that actually defined the debates in the 70s and 80s, but UNESCO was still struggling, and particularly in the 1990s with the rise of global capitalism and other privatization and liberalization, you had ITU, International Telecommunication Union, became shifting from the political problems that UNESCO was confronting to more technical issues like the world governance on internet, internet governance, and you have the ICANN and DNS, the crucial things that they're taking up here, and governance becomes a buzzword here, multi-stakeholderism and all of those things actually have risen to the forefront and actually sort of demolished any idea of the media as press as an important instrument, as a fourth sort of within the grand scheme of things. So what I am saying here is to all of you, the question that was posed here is media subverting as a tool of democracy. It actually becomes more challenging in the realm of digital media. Whether they're not, social media is neither social nor media. Facebook is not media. Twitter is not media. Elon Musk is not media. They're not dealing with media. Media is channels of how reporting is done, fact-based, the inverted pyramid style of journalism, where you need to check your facts. It's not opinionated. It is based on facts alone, and that is what we saw in the 40s and 50s and 60s in India with the freedom struggle. And we had great journalists who were writing and investigative journalism at the forefront. But with the social networking sites, with digital media, it becomes difficult to even think about media as quote unquote media, because we need to really put that under sort of erasure, so to speak. Like, we have to put it aside and say these are not media. The function of media is, as I said to you, Maria Reza and Dmitry Muratov, what they did as part of investigative journalism. So what has become of press today? How do you develop robust interconnections between free speech and press freedom? Those are the things that are in front of us. And I think examples of Mahatma Gandhi, Mohandas Gandhi, and Reinhold Niebuhr, and also William Hawking would give us some ideas to sort of develop a more robust understanding. We need a new imagination, because recently we had young people are not reading news. That was a Reuters study. They're not connecting with news. Young people are elsewhere. So how do you develop a new generation of people who seem to be least bit bothered about news? And what we need today is to move beyond liberalism and neoliberalism. We need to really look at the new way of engaging with the young people and developing forms of democracy which are in tune with the digital forms of communication. By which I mean, I don't mean the Facebooks, I don't mean Twitter, I don't mean Snapchat, Reddit. Those are the privatized corporate communication structures. I mean local journalism, which is very vibrant in the United States. The city where I came from, I did my PhD in Minnesota, is something called MinPost. They do a hyper-local journalism where young people, the place where I teach, we have a very solid journalism program where young people go out and interview senators, local legislators in Nashville. They go around and develop their skills, hone their skills. But journalism itself is still a standard bearer for media. So under media, I would consider journalism as primary, press and journalism. But digital forms outside of the ambit of Facebook and Twitter, you find local forms of digital communications that are there. Young people sort of use it in very savvy and very interesting ways. And for them, it is in my own research, I found that in Palestine, I was visiting and doing field work. Young people are questioning their own Arab traditions. They are questioning Israeli occupation, but yet they are producing forms of journalism which are first rate. And I will close here with a couple of comments about contemporary India. It is sad that we use the sedition laws today. The government and all governments use that sedition laws and in terms of bringing putting a pressure on journalists to subjugate them and to sort of put them in prison. Maybe Justice J.V. Ramana the other day said that he was talking about television as kangaroo courts, and also about we need independent journalism that is not media that is not based on people who are in real estate business, business interests, diverse business interests and all that. So there's a lot of works here, in terms of political economy of media. People have done immense research in structural relations in media, particularly if you look at India also. In Telangana also, you look at the television broadcast networks, you will see that they're tethered to very caste-based and highly politicized. So it's difficult to even talk about journalism in that context. So thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate it. Thanks.